Welcome to the $1 Million Career, where we show you how to plan, build, and supercharge your own $1 Million career. I have with me today my returning guest host, Craig Picken. Craig is president of North Star Search Group, based in Wilmington, North Carolina, an industry-leading search firm specializing in aerospace and aviation. How you doing this morning, Craig?
Good, Rob. Doing all right. Happy Sunday.
Yeah, man. Hey, is the ocean too cold now or what?
Yeah, it's a little chilly out now, so that's all right. We hung out with a fire in the backyard this morning.
But, the amazing thing about the ocean, I go to the ocean, obviously not as much as you do, but it seems to me that even on like really, really cold days, there's always like one guy like way out there. And I'm always wondering, like, who is that guy like way the hell out there? You could just see his head like bobbing.
Well,
right?
Is it too cold is a relative term. And, is it too cold for me? Yeah. Is it too cold for these guys and their, some of the folks out there in their wetsuits or their spring suits? And,
maybe he's got a wetsuit.
They love it. I don't. I'm in the backyard today. I went to the gym this morning. I'm in the backyard. We put a fire on, just threw a fire in the fireplace and we're reading for a few hours. I was just enjoying watching the dogs play. And it's a good morning. It's a good morning.
I've got this thing called a solo stove. Okay?
I know that.
And it's like a fire in a tin can. It's a big one. And I started out grilling these smash burgers. But yesterday morning, I got a little bit adventurous, and I did a breakfast on the iron skillet. There's an iron skillet attachment that goes over the top of it. I did bacon, pancakes, scrambled eggs, sausage. And what I ended up doing is taking the pancake, folding it in half as almost like a tortilla. I put the egg inside a stick of bacon and just drizzled some maple syrup.
Yep.
I mean, it was just unreal. My neighbors are coming out, crowing their necks like, wow, what the hell are you cooking over there anyways? I said, come on, man. I got lots to go. I like 3 pounds of bacon. And it was just incredible.
And there's something about cooking. I've got this thing called the Wilmington Grill. So we built this whole big fireplace and then a grill. So we've got this thing called the Wilmington Grill, which is gas. And then right next to it, I got one of those big green eggs if I want to cook on wood or charcoal. Jeez. So, it's this whole setup, but there's something about cooking breakfast outside. I don't know what it is about eggs and bacon and pancakes. When we got the Wilmington Grill, we've got the same thing. You got a griddle. Something about cooking them outside. I don't know if it's just the fresh air that adds flavor to it or whatever, but that's the most awesome thing in the world.
You're right. I had the whole setup. I had my cowboy boots, jeans, red and white checkered cowboy shirt, cowboy hat, my horse riding gloves. I mean, I was out there with the sticks and
you're up in the mountains. You're up in the mountains. You're up in the mountains too. So it's
way up in the mountains, up about 9,000 feet. The wind's just blowing in my face. The trees are bending over sideways. I think we're going to get some snow here, man. It was a snow sky.
Wow.
You can feel it coming. It's definitely coming, man.
It's only October. So
anyway,
let's switch from breakfast to you got a great topic today.
Yeah. So knowing when to fold them. That old Kenny Rogers song, right?
Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
I don't want to show off my singing voice here because it's terrible, but you got to know when to fold them. And I was thinking about this the other day. I'm probably guilty of this a little bit, but one of my themes, as our listeners and viewers know, is that I've got these attributes that I'm all the time looking for in my candidates. And I've done blogs and podcasts about these attributes of highly successful peak performers, grit, determination, indefatigability, all these different attributes. And I was thinking about this the other day, and it was like, we celebrate resilience and determination in our society, at work. But, a poker champ, and we're just talking about poker off camera, a poker champ can only be a champ if they know when to fold them. So in other words, if you take that to a corporate analogy, sometimes people have to throw the towel in, man.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes you have to know when to quit. And I think quitters have a bad name now because of quiet quitting and quiet firing and all this stuff. So I just want to bring this topic up today about, when is the right time to actually quit? I mean, how do you know, and what can you do as a candidate to prepare yourself for that day where you may have to?
When do you think it is?
You may have to fold them. Well, when I think it is, having been in the situation before, having been, I've always been a greedy guy, always involved in competitive sports, and it's been drilled into my head, Rob, you never quit anything. Mm-hmm. My old man used to tell me that training special forces, never quitting is a big thing. But when do I think it is? It's not really, with me, it's not an emotional decision. With me, it's a rational and a logical decision. It has to be. It has to be objective. And one of the things I'll talk about is, how do you know when it's that right time? For me, I think it's setting benchmarks and metrics before I do something so that I know it's a lost cause. I think one of the good things about personal friends and colleagues like you and Jack and some other people is you become sort of like my outside advisors, my independent advisors. So you have to have somebody on the outside who can look at what you're doing on the inside to tell you if you're on the right track or not. And a lot of times other people can see things that you don't. It's like, seeing the trees through the forest. And then I think having a coach is a good way to keep yourself on track. Because sometimes the coach is going to tell you, hey, you're on the wrong track, man. So.
Yeah. Look, here's kind of the way, look, I've had, what am I on? I'm on my military, then I was airplane sales, and I was real estate. Now I'm in my fourth career, late 50s. I'm in my fourth career.
Yeah.
And I remember the military, what was my decision to get out of the military? I was constant. I don't want to say I was constantly in trouble, but I was a constant. It just wasn't doing anything for me, and I was disruptive.
Yeah, right.
And it just wasn't. Look, I served my country. I loved the squadron I was in, but then I went over to NATO, and I was an advisor in NATO, and I'm like, is this as good as it's going to get?
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, after a long, I'm like, yeah, this is probably. And then coming back from Europe, it was like, okay, you go back to sea. Now you got to go back to sea.
Yeah. And
then after going back to sea, I'm like, is this as good as it gets?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, no. If this is as good as it gets, I'm jumping out. I'm getting out.
I think what you're saying is that if it ain't a hell yeah,
it's a no. And then I went to an OEM. I went to an aircraft manufacturer in Savannah, Georgia. And it was great for 2 years. And then I got put in the penalty box. And I was like, all right, is this as good as it's going to get? Yep. All right, I'm out. Let's go. Let's go do something else.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately where I think people got to go is like, when you sit there and you look at your life and what you're doing, and if you're constantly just dreading going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's when it's time to cut bait or fold them.
Yeah. I've done a podcast and I've done $1 Million Career episode with Pete Gold.
Yep.
SF guy, one of my top 5 best friends on the planet. I love this guy, worked with him for a long time. He's a gritty, down to earth Green Beret, And he told me it's probably about 2 years ago. I was in the Emirates, and I was asking this question. I've been there a long time, and I said, Pete, how do you really know, when to move on? And Pete had a really good way of explaining it. He said, if you're in a position that you're not jumping out of bed, and you're in a position where you start to be disruptive. It was interesting that you said that, Craig. I was disruptive because that was one of his telltale signs. If you're no longer filtering what you say to people and what you do, and you become borderline disruptive to your organization, he goes, it's probably time to get out.
Yeah.
And he said, and he told me several of his experiences where he just got to a point where he felt like he wasn't giving 120%. And he said, if I'm not giving 120%, and I'm not doing the best that I can, the best that I could do, then I feel guilty collecting a paycheck. And he said, that's it, man. I'm moving to something else.
Yeah. But here is where I always encourage people to have a friend, confidant, someone they can go to, a go-to person outside of work.
Yeah.
So for military people, find a couple people that are outside of the military, because you get the group think, right?
Right.
Yeah. When I was at the Savannah, Georgia company, everybody knows, it's Gulfstream Aircraft.
Yeah.
I'm like, everybody's like, yeah, but you got a great job. Why hang out? Why do it? Like, because it sucks.
Yeah.
I'm in a cubicle. Everybody's telling me, hey, it's great. It's what, and you're like, what else is out there? There's something better.
Yeah.
You got to go jump out. But the challenge is, look, you say it eloquently. If you're not moving, you're dying. If you're sitting in your foxhole, praying you don't get shot, you're going to get shot. You're going to get killed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, you got to have the courage to move on. I mean, professional investors, I think, have to have courage to cut their, you make a bad trade in PayPal or something like that, right? You got to cut your losses and just accept it as a learning experience.
What would be your advice to somebody who has a pretty good career, but they're not really feeling it? They're not really excited about it. Do you have any thoughts? I mean, generally speaking, how long people should stay at a company? I get this question all the time. Hey, Rob, I've been here 3 years. 3 years enough? Is it time to get another position so I can get another big raise, another promotion, or should I just stick it out for the 15 years? How do you handle that with people?
1 year is not enough. 30 years is too many. Literally. And I'll tell you this, I'll look at somebody who's got if I look at a resume and if I see a bunch of 1 year jumps, company to company to company after a year or year and a half, and I don't see all I see is a change in geography, red flags are going up immediately. There's somebody that, can't get along in an organization, isn't very good, or, just doesn't know what they're looking for. All three of which are not good.
Yeah, because you could have somebody that's really, really good at what they do, but maybe they can't get along organizationally. They should be an entrepreneur.
That's right. Yeah, bingo. And I look at a person who's been at a company for 30 years and then who wants to make a change. And my very candid answer is, you got a lot of convincing to do. If you've been at, like I work with Boeing people, I work with people for United Technologies or Rockwell, whatever, Raytheon Technologies now, big companies, and they've been there for 20, 30 years. Yeah. It's like, what, did you just wake up and realize that this isn't the place for you? Now, the challenge is when you're there that long, you've got to convince people that you can change. You can change, you're not so ingrained in that big company culture that you can move somewhere else.
And don't you think that if someone stays, what are your thoughts on somebody staying there for so long that they fall behind in terms of competitive compensation because they're no longer getting that big bump after 5 years? Do you think that's a legitimate concern or what?
Look, I think what I want to see is this. For any professional, I want to see meaningful change.
Yeah.
If you change after 2 or 3 years and you go to you make a meaningful change, and you can specifically say, I left company A for company B because it was more money, it was a bigger title and more money, or I took on a leadership. I went from an individual contributor to a leadership role. You got to see step up, continually increasing roles of responsibility.
Yeah.
If I'm just seeing people change geography, doesn't that scare you? If you just see people that are just changing geography kind of willy-nilly?
Yeah. The only time I change a geography, 1 or 2 geography changes is acceptable. But what I look at is, where does the wife's parents live?
Yeah. Because
sometimes people end up wanting to move where the wife's parents are for good reason. Having kids, they have to care for their parents or something. Yeah. But if I see somebody like 2 years in Texas, a year in Florida, 2 years in West Virginia, a year in New York, it becomes problematic. And even if I understand it, even if they are legitimate reasons, then you have to, I mean, as a recruiter, we have to convince the client to also come to the same conclusions that we have. So it is a flag. It's a big flag.
Well, that's the fear of people that are jumping around.
Yeah.
And it ultimately comes that somebody is going to look at your resume and you're starting from a hole that you have to dig out of. And the question is always going to be, what would make me think you're going to stick around my organization any longer than you've been at these others?
Yeah.
And then the question, then you better have a damn good answer. If you've been jumping around, you better have a damn good answer, because it costs companies money to onboard you. You're not effective for a few months. You get there, you stick around for a cup of coffee, and then you leave. Yeah. What did you do? What did you learn? Then the next company comes along. It's kind of like that. It's a good friend of mine likes to say, is after two, it's you.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's talking about divorce. After two divorces, it's not the other person, it's you.
Yeah. I thought you were saying after 2:00, it's you.
After two, it's you. After two divorces, it's not the other person, it's you.
Yeah. I think quitting can become contagious too. I think if you get too used to quitting, then it's going to build upon itself. So, I mean, there's obviously a fine line, and that's the whole point of this episode, is to figure out like where that fine line is, because I just have a bias against people that quit, but I'm starting to come around now, because if you have a good reason to quit, then that's what you should do.
I have no bias around people who quit. What I love to see is people who come to me and say, I've gone as far as I can in the organization I'm at. My next step up is to take my boss's job. My boss ain't leaving. I'm either stagnant here and I do as much as I can, or I go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or, look, I know there's, I'm inside sales. I want to be outside sales. I want an outside sales role. Or whatever. I mean,
I had a guy one time, he was going to quit, and I counseled him. I coached him. And I said, why do you want to quit that? I was actually trying to place this guy. And I always ask the question like you do, why are you looking at another potential opportunity? What would make another opportunity really attractive to you? And the guy told me, he says, he loves the company, loves everything he's doing, but he has a boss who would be his next promotion. That's been there 3-4 years, and he doesn't see this guy moving off the X. And I recommended to him in a roundabout way, well, try and make your boss look really good. Instead of going against your boss, work with him, try and make him really, really successful. Like pick out like a sensitive project or a high profile project he's working on, help him be successful so that when he's very successful, he'll get promoted and then you'll take his job. And the guy's like, that makes a lot of sense. So this is what this guy did over the course of a couple of months. He figured out what the sensitive high profile project was that his boss was working on. And instead of having this adversarial relationship, he helped him. He worked overtime. He bent over backwards to help his boss out. And the project was a overwhelming success 6 months later. And guess what? His boss gets promoted. And of course, his boss loves this guy because he knows that, his direct report helped him. So he ended up getting the job that he wanted by actually helping his boss, not hindering him.
So your performance opens a lot of doors. And this is what I tell the college kids I mentor. If you get good grades and you have great internships and you do well at all those internships and you show a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of a lot of great performance, every door in the world is open to you. Now you get crappy grades. 3 doors just closed. You can't get along inside the organization, or you didn't do very well. 3 more doors just closed. Yeah. And eventually what happens to mediocre performers who can't figure out where they want to be, is that the decision is not, they're not making the decision. They're picking the door. Their options are limited to the doors that people are willing to leave open for them.
Yeah.
And we talked to a client on Friday. They can't make a decision. And they've been telling me, we're going to make a decision this week. And then it keeps rolling. I said, finally, the conversation I had with them on Friday was, look, I'll be very candid with you. If you guys can't make the decision will be made for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
People move on. They have choices. The other guy gets a vote too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. I just had that happen too. I had the exact same thing happen. They were dragging their feet. One candidate, they lost because somebody else hired him. The other candidate, they were freaking out over the personality profile, couldn't make a decision, were reconsidering. That person got a job with somebody else too.
Yeah.
Both are my clients. So, hey, you know what? I had two candidates for them, both of which got hired by two other separate clients of mine. Yeah. And now they're back to square one.
Yeah. They're back. Couldn't make a decision. I mean, look, I'm fortunate. I've got a lot of business.
Yeah. Exactly.
I can pick and choose who I work with now.
Yeah, exactly.
Great place to be.
Yeah.
Company I'm, about ready to say bye-bye to. I don't like their process. I sent them an invoice, haven't gotten it back. Haven't gotten a retainer check. It's been, and if I have to ask twice, I'm mad.
Right.
And then I don't like the process. I'm like, all right, they're not responsive. I don't like the process. Are they going to be a key customer for me? Probably not.
Get rid of them, man.
I'm moving on. I'm gone. I'm cutting bait. It's like all right. I put a couple of weeks worth of time into this thing, but I'm cutting bait.
And then on top of that, you can start sourcing your people.
But it's like this: when you fire a bad job, you open up doors to go find a great job. But the thing is that you have to, as a person, if you're stuck in a cubicle and it sucks and it's the best you can get, you fire your boss, you fire your company, and you are now, once you make that decision, you are now freeing yourself to go do something better. What's holding you back?
Yeah.
Eliminate the stuff that's holding you back.
Yeah. It's like, I always like to go back to the military analogies, because the military is a great analogy because it's a metal on metal business. It's life or death. It's combat. I mean, that's how I define a true meritocracy. I mean, let's face it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people have heard of the Pyrrhic victory, right? It's like winning the battle but losing the war. That came from Napoleon when he was invading Russia.
Mm-hmm.
He took so many losses. He won all these battles. He was in Russia, but he took so many casualties and so many losses of military men and equipment that, he won a couple of famous battles, but you know what? He lost the war.
Yeah.
And that's why they call it a Pyrrhic victory. And you can write down the history books. In our case, as Americans, you'd have to say that Pearl Harbor was a Pyrrhic victory.
Absolutely.
The Japanese crippled our Navy, but they retreated. And from the next battle of Midway, the war was essentially over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I interviewed about 20 years ago for this job. And it, really interesting. I liked the company. They liked me. It never quite came about. But I sat with the COO of the company, and he was talking about the sales team that they had. And I liked what he said, and this is what people need to do with their lives. He sat there and he had the entire sales team in, and they would talk about, it's always, salespeople, I love them. It's always the sales prevention people, right? It can't ever be them. It's the sales prevention team, right? God forbid. It's never the sales guys. It's always somebody else. So, but he would sit there and say, okay, so you say that you're too bogged down in admin and doing expense accounts from travel. Yeah. Okay. He goes, all right, all you got to do is send receipts to Amy. Just scan your receipts, email them to her. She'll do your expense accounts. Check will be 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
What's next? And then we're not, marketing is not getting us the whatever, all right, marketing is now getting you 10 leads a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, now that I've taken away all of your excuses, are you going to sell?
Yeah.
And they were all like, oh crap. Now we actually got to go do our jobs. Right. And I think that people need to do that with their own lives though.
Yeah.
You sit down with your significant other, your spouse, or you say, all right, what's holding us back here?
Yeah.
And there's some things you can't change. Maybe you got, but there are things that you can.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll wrap this up with, so how do you know when it's time to cut bait? How do you know it's time to fold them? And I go back to some things I said at the top of the show. I think you can boil this down to three things. One, before you start a venture, whether or not it's a relationship or a new job, you got to set up benchmarks or metrics prior to the engagement. And if you don't hit these, you really have to start thinking about, is this the right job or is this the right relationship? Number two, no matter how much time, effort, and money you put into something, whether it's an investment, as you mentioned, Craig, or whether it's a new job or a relationship, you can't fret over the sunk costs. You have to think about the future. And the last one is have a coach or a similar external advisor that you can trust that can advise you from time to time on whether or not you're doing the right thing. Because if we keep it within ourselves, we make our own decisions. It's not only selfish, counterproductive, but it gets to be too emotional. So you have to look at external human resources, and I'm talking about coaching or external advisors or friends, like you said, outside of what you do, and rely on their objective feedback on whether or not what you're doing is the right course of action. Because if you can do these three things, set up the benchmarks, don't fret over the investment that you've already made, and the outside advisors, then I think you'll be able to make an objective, logical, and rational decision on whether or not it's time to quit, compared to an emotional kind of off the cuff, quiet quitting type of a thing. So,
no, I totally agree. I think the mentorship, I think having people outside your organization is unbelievable, and there's 100 different ways to find those people. You got to go look for them.
Yeah.
And then I think the big thing is really, I think the most important thing is, if you're thinking about folding and cutting bait, understand what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other part of it. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that most people struggle with. It's like, I don't know what I want. I just know this isn't it.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous game. That's a dangerous game to play.
I think that's a good subject for our future podcast.
I think so.
Know the end game. Yeah.
Yep.
So, Craig, how do people get a hold of you anyways?
I'm all over Facebook. Or not Facebook. I'm not on Facebook.
Facebook.
LinkedIn.
That's
Facebook.
a new one, man.
What's Facebook? Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. You can, my website is northstaresg.com. Email me, Craig at northstaresg.com, or phone 910-509-7129.
Yeah, I really encourage people to check out Craig. I mean, your stuff on LinkedIn gets a lot of hits, man. I mean, you are really kicking, and taking names later. I mean, it's really good stuff. I'd encourage people to check out Craig Picken on LinkedIn. But again, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you coming on the show again, and look forward to talking with you next week. Be careful about your fires out there, everyone. We talked about a lot of solo stove fires and Wilmington fires. Just make sure you're safe with those fires, and you put them out before you go to bed at night.
There you go. Enjoy Sunday, Rob.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at northstaresg.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Picken.